Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the MacIver Report. Today is Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. I am Michael Lucas. I am the policy analyst here and chief economist. And across from me is
My name is Courtney Graves, and I'm an intern.
Ann.
My name is Rebecca Draeger, and I'm an intern and content producer here.
And we're going to start off with Rebecca today. Rebecca was with us like 6 months ago, and she's back. She just spent some time at the American Conservative, which is Pat Buchanan's great think tank, and she did a lot of stuff in foreign policy research while she was there. So we'll start with you because there's a lot of stuff going on in the geopolitical world. So catch us up to speed on what's going on. First, I think with China. Let's do China.
China. So my research with China primarily focused on the U.S. Policy towards Taiwan, which is a big sticking point for China. But in essence, right now we have a policy of strategic ambiguity towards Taiwan. We don't officially recognize it as a country. We also have not clarified whether we would come to Taiwan's defense if China were to invade or not. In theory, this both incentivizes Taiwan not to declare independence and also China from not invading. But whether or not this policy can and will continue on is kind of an open question now. Some people have stipulated that we should clarify not to intervene or clarify to intervene, and that this might help prevent miscalculation from all parties. And there's an open debate on whether or not Taiwan actually constitutes a vital interest for the United States. So that was the bulk of my research into U.S. policy towards Taiwan right now. It seems like after the national security strategy was released, that the status quo is holding, and that's the current Trump administration's policy. Yeah.
What's your major again, by the way?
International studies.
Okay, great. So this is right up your alley then. So explain, what was it? Strategic ambiguity?
Strategic ambiguity.
Okay. What's the bottom line for that?
The bottom line for that is that we've had a policy where we armed Taiwan since 1979 when we gained formal relations with the People's Republic of China. But we have not told them that we would support them if they were to declare independence and then China were to invade. China wants Taiwan. China's wanted Taiwan since the inception of Taiwan. And China has said that eventually they will be reunified with Taiwan. But the timeline has been debated. There was a white paper that China released in 2022 that said by 2027 we will be reunited. We prefer peaceful means, but we're willing to use force if necessary. So we'll see.
So this is official U.S. policy, right? This is one China policy, right? Same thing, right? Where the United States considers Taiwan to be part of China.
I believe it's ambiguous right now. Right now we have no embassies in Taiwan, but we have de facto embassies. They're the American Institutes of Taiwan. And, you know, we have formal relations with China, but we have said that the status quo will hold when it comes to Taiwan. So I think if we were to, recognize them as a country, which we don't currently do, that would provoke China.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. How about Germany? Because I know that's another area of interest for you.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. Earlier this month, the Munich Security Council happened, and Marco Rubio had this big speech that seemed a little bit friendlier than J.D. Vance's last year at the Munich Security Council.
Where he ripped into everyone for not upholding the principle of free speech.
Yeah,
things like
not
that.
upholding the principle of free speech, and some things with Romanian elections and the unwillingness to work with right-wing populist parties in Europe. So yes, but this one seemed a little bit friendlier. He called Europe like our cherished allies and our oldest friends, and like kept saying Western civilization. We're all a part of this historic Western civilization. We share Christian values. And so it seemed as though the administration is trying to recommit itself to the transatlantic alliance, especially since, headlines now seem to say otherwise. But yes, with Germany, the research that I was doing at TAC was primarily focused on the German view towards Russia and what they're doing now to possibly prepare for a future conflict. They haven't reintroduced the draft, but they introduced other legislation that now says all 18-year-olds, 18-year-old men will have to go and get health screenings. And like fill out a survey that says whether or not they would be willing to do service. It's optional for women, but the idea is that if there were to be a larger conflict on the European continent, that they wouldn't have to waste time to see who is actually able and eligible. Yeah. So there's that. That was passed in December of 2025, and it's caused some controversy over there in Germany. Yeah.
Okay. So this is all very good stuff to know, because right now all the talk is around like the Middle East. Iran. We had the 12-day war not too long ago, and it seems like things are about to pop off yet again. Do you have any sense of whether that's likely? We looked at Polymarket earlier, and where they put the odds at, it was like 30-40% by like March,
the end of
April?
March, I believe it was in the 30-something%, and then by December 31st of 2026, it was 70%. But, Polymarket has been changing its mind on whether or not the U.S. will strike Iran imminently. Earlier in January of this year, the odds were higher by the end of January. So it is unpredictable.
They were higher in January than they are now.
In the middle of January, I believe, I'd have to be fact checked on this, but they were like 50 or 60% that the U.S. strikes Iran by the end of January, and this would have been like in the 8th or 9th. Trump had a couple of tweets like "help is on the way," these kinds of things, and so I think that really increased the odds. But yeah, it's an open question now. Allegedly, he'll be talking about it in the State of the Union tonight. So.
Yes, heard that as well. Any thoughts on this, Courtney? Do you think there will be boots on the ground?
I don't know about boots on the ground, but I do think strikes are definitely possible.
Strikes, yeah. I think at some point, long enough time horizon, yeah, there's going to be.
I would say in the short horizon, yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Boots on the ground, though, I think that's quite a bit less likely.
Yeah, I don't know that even, the enlisted are on board with this. Typically, if you're in the military, you're very patriotic and you're going to do your duty. But enlistments have been down. They resurged once Trump became president again. They were really low during Biden's term, and so they're higher now. I don't know if they are at the level they were at during Trump's first term. But, not everyone who's in the military is like super patriotic and willing to do whatever. For a lot of people, it's a career. Even if you're going in as like, some E1 or something like that, where you're just trying to get your foot in, right? Start a career in the military. So publicly too, I don't think it's very popular. Remember, Charlie Kirk did a poll of this last year on X, 750,000 votes. It was like 86% said no war with Iran. Now, whether they meant by that boots on the ground or like no sort of military strikes at all, who's to say? But I think that definitely writes off any sort of boots on the ground military action. But if you don't do that, it doesn't really seem like you could affect the regime change that you're hoping for. Because I told you this before we started as well, that China has sent Iran thousands of missiles, and Russia is providing Iran with real-time satellite imagery so that the Iranians can see the location of every single military aircraft, warship, you name it, boots, bases, everything. So it seems like China and Russia are really interested in preventing this.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know that I believe that there's like a popular groundswell of opposition in Iran, right? Like if you were to just start dropping bombs of, the dissidents there, those who aren't, in favor of the regime are going to, take the opportunity to do that. I don't know that they're a sizable enough force.
Mm.
I don't know. But tonight, we'll see. I'm sure he's definitely going to say something about it,
Mm.
right? But last time, too, with the 12-day war, you had all these rumors coming out, right, saying, oh, the U.S. is going to do something Friday night or Saturday morning. And it was a week late.
Mm.
So this could be, or it was a week early. So this could be a week early, too, or 2 weeks early, or something like that. So, yeah, that'll be tonight at 8 o'clock, right?
8 o'clock Central
Yeah.
Standard Time.
Yeah. All right. Okay, let's segue to something a little more pertinent and relevant to Wisconsin. Tony Evers' State of the State address last week. Thoughts on this? Courtney, let's start with you.
Yeah, for sure. So I thought his address was pretty interesting. It seemed like he was focused on a lot of the wrong metrics, though. So I know one thing we were talking about was that he was touting how Wisconsin had 26% growth in wages during the first 6 years of his administration. But when you really look into those numbers, that's pretty much the same as wage growth in the United States more broadly. So it's not really anything to brag about. He also focused a lot on education, which has been probably his top policy reform as his time in governor. And with that, Wisconsin has seen a lot of declines in education, despite spending even more. So I think that brings up a more broad issue that even though we've increased our spending, it's, I believe, doubled in nominal terms since 2000. And in real terms, it's increased about, say, by 9% per student. But even though we've seen that increase in spending, we're not seeing increases in educational outcomes. We're actually seeing declines. We're now behind the state of Mississippi when it comes to proficiency in math and reading. And I think that's really concerning, that we actually need to look at what are we doing with our money and how can we use it more efficiently, not how can we just give more money to education.
Yeah, what was it when what do they call it, NEP, the National Education Report, right? You know what I'm talking about? That the DOE does. It was, what was it? I think it was 4%, check me on this, 4% of Black fourth graders in Milwaukee are proficient in reading.
Yep.
Which is lower than Mississippi, right?
Right.
That was the
Milwaukee has the
big
highest
headline.
disparity when it comes to racial gaps in education.
Yeah, huge. And math was no better.
And even if you just look at the numbers more broadly, it's nearly 2/3 of students in Wisconsin are below grade level in math, and nearly 7/10 are below grade level in reading.
Yeah.
So those are very concerning numbers.
Yes. Yeah, I got to say, guys, this whole experiment with education isn't really working out. We should probably just go back to telling the kids what they need to know and then making them do their work. Because I think you knew this. Maybe you did too. I was a teacher for 3 years, and I was at a pretty good school. Even there, it was hard to follow up with students and enforce any kind of discipline if they weren't doing their work, which is the number one most important thing to me as a teacher, and should be the number one most important thing to a student, because your entire job is school.
Why was that?
Oh my gosh, administrative bloat. Even in the charter system, you still have these same hurdles that traditional public schools have. The only one of the main benefits actually of charter schools is there's no unions, no teachers unions. You still have the problem when you're in a charter school, and all charter schools are public schools. Folks, I've argued with so many of you on Facebook about the Barney Charter School that was run by, what's her name? It was a Barney Charter School here in Wisconsin, and they ousted the principal at that school. I can't believe I can't remember her name right now. She's married to someone very important in Wisconsin politics. But everyone was saying, this is a private school. You have to let them have a TPUSA chapter. And I'm like, no, it's a charter school. all charter schools are public schools. You can't have any sort of partisan clubs at a school, and that was the issue at hand here. But anyway, so unions, administrators. I think Badger Institute's put out some charts recently showing the administrative bloat, right, in the public school system, where teachers are going down, student enrollment has fallen off a cliff, but administrators has just gone through the roof. So yeah, you got to fire these people. I can tell you, even at my school, in the office, there's like, it was a smaller school, but there were 5 or 6 people that I would have fired on the spot. They didn't do anything. They were usually interventionists, right? Special ed or something like that. And they taught classes 1 day a week. But they're making more money than me. Why are they making more money than me when they have fewer duties, fewer responsibilities? They don't have any sort of grading that they have to do. They have the easiest job imaginable. And yet, I mean, why resources are growing towards their employment, right? There's always, you know, when you're talking about like the leaders of like a special ed department, they're solid. They're like truly, truly experts. But when you start bringing in assistants and paraprofessionals, that's where the trouble comes in. So at least in Florida, which is where I taught, you could fire a teacher whenever you wanted. You don't have to give any notice. And I saw that a couple times. I was like, hey, where's so-and-so? He's gone. It's like, we still have 2 months left. He's gone. All right. So anyway, education, yeah, not doing well. Maybe homeschool your kids. It's really easy. All right, let's go next. Articles. Well, do you have anything else that you want to add to that?
In terms of the state of the state?
Yeah, state of the state, education, or anything else.
Well, I would just say that, like, in his speech, he was railing against the Republicans for failing to, further fund and increase the funding for K through 12 education in the state of Wisconsin. And he kept saying, like, these school districts are having to go through referendums and raising property taxes. And like the little bit of research that I'd done on school district referenda in Wisconsin last year showed that one, they can advertise a referenda for whatever cause they'd like, and then they can get the money, and there's no statute saying they have to do what they said they were going to do with that money. And so there were a lot of projects that school districts had gone to referenda for that they had previously received money for years prior, and also from COVID money. So like I think one of the broader structural issues is you have to look at how these school districts are using their funding. And that's difficult when lots and lots of school districts in Wisconsin, they don't have operational budgets. They've got like these budget summaries, but I think there needs to be a little bit more transparency into where this money is going, how it's being used, instead of just blaming the Republican lawmakers for refusing to open the wallets even further.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on this?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah. Budgets are a big issue in this state. State budgets, school budgets. Yeah. They essentially write a very dreamy sort of financial statement, which isn't binding in any way, and then do whatever they want. Okay. So what's next? Medicaid and gambling. So I'm sure you guys have noticed, but there's just like legislator after legislator is coming out with bill after bill after bill. Like it's just an onslaught of legislation, and Facebook's going crazy, X is going crazy. Every legislator is saying, look at what I'm doing. Feel free to chime in on this. The session is almost over. There is a 0% chance that any of these bills get passed. This is performative. And why is it performative? Because what's happening in April? We have elections, right? And then in November, we have more elections. So everyone right now, before the session ends, is trying to really beeline for these things. Or advertise to their constituents that they've been really active for the last 2 years, or last year and a half, because we still got another 6 months till November. But these two stories, so Ben Yount wrote these. There was legislation introduced by Republican lawmakers, I believe, to extend Medicaid coverage for postpartum women. I think currently you're covered for like 6 weeks of care, and I think this was going to increase it to 10 months. So the number of women who are probably eligible under Medicaid and actually having kids and needing postpartum, you know, you probably need some degree of postpartum care no matter what. But um, I can't imagine that like the budgetary impact of this is very good. But the thing that comes to mind is, well, we have Republicans, proposing expanding what is a welfare program. I don't really know how to feel about this. I want, some level of welfare. What I would like to see personally is everything else get axed by like 50%, and then we can talk about this. But any thoughts on this Medicaid expansion?
I also don't exactly know where I draw my line on like what amount of welfare is good and what amount of welfare that I wouldn't support. But
Yeah,
how about you?
I think it depends on thresholds. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it depends, and it also really depends on the incentives behind the programs. I think this is a little different because it's just about postpartum care, but 10 months seems like a little bit of overkill. Again, I haven't seen the budgetary impacts either, so I can't exactly give my word on what I think of this bill, but
Yeah.
I was just wondering if it would set up like a perverse incentive structure for women who are on Medicare, but I haven't looked into it, so like I don't know
Yeah,
all the
'cause
ins and outs of it.
my main concern with welfare is just that there's not enough oversight on making sure people are actually doing interviews and getting jobs and moving up in their economic status. So when it comes to things like this, that doesn't really affect it so much. But
Yeah.
I think that's what Wisconsin needs to be a lot more worried about, particularly when it comes to programs like TANF.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so SNAP as well as like Wisconsin Works, right? Which
Yep.
is like welfare to work programs here in the state. You are no longer required to show up in person in order to qualify
yeah,
for benefits. You can call on the phone. You can submit your, proof of ID digitally, right? You actually aren't required to have any sort of face-to-face interaction. So with those things, certainly there's definitely abuse going on.
for sure.
But speaking of perverse incentives, I don't know if we
No.
should call it perverse, but it would incentivize women to have more kids
Yeah.
and also incentivize them to lower their incomes
Yeah.
just a little bit. But it's there. That's the incentive. Or, have more kids, get pregnant more often. It will be negligible, but jury's
was
out
there
on
any
whether that's
sort of
perverse.
numbers on how many women would qualify for this, or?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't even think Legislative Fiscal Bureau has come out with like an impact on
Okay.
it. I think they have to get to that. So we'll see. And then gambling. I don't know if are you clued in on the gambling situation?
Not super clued in on that, no.
It's really simple. So online sports betting through what are these big sports betting apps like DraftKings, things
Yeah.
like that. You see ads for them all the time. The Super Bowl commercials where it's just like,
Places like Kalshi.
yes, yeah, things like that. So online sports betting, the dispute right now is whether this form of gambling should go to the tribes or if it can be opened up to anyone. The assembly has just announced their decision on that, which is it's going to the tribes. So this is kind of this is sort of the deal with tribes throughout the U.S. So we displaced you from from your native homes, Trail of Tears, all that, Andrew Jackson, and then as a way to say that we're sorry, you guys can have a monopoly on one of like the most vicious things that you could do. Vicious by I mean vice vicious, gambling. You can smoke inside, you can drink, like your entire economy will depend on gambling. So that's kind of the arrangement, which is that the reservations need something. these are nations in the sense that they are peoples, not states. We do not recognize them as states, as governments. They have local governments, but they have no effect. So I'm losing my train of thought here. They get to secure their monopoly on gambling. So I think the way it's working out is the tribes are going to have servers in their casinos, and you can use their apps in order to place sports bets, or maybe it's. I'm
But
not
you
sure on
won't
the
be allowed to
particulars on
just
that.
from your phone place a sports bet.
No, it's all gonna go through the tribes.
Interesting.
I don't,
Through like a pay cut, or how does that work?
yeah, they'll exact their fee just like the casinos tend to
Interesting.
do
Huh.
when you place bets like
Does
that.
this meaningfully help the tribes in any way? Because last I heard they weren't doing too hot. Like, is the gambling wealth concentrated in just a couple of hands within these tribes, or?
I don't know about Wisconsin because I'm new here, but a few years ago, I want to say in the 2010s, the tribe that lived close to me in California, they're Pawnee, but the tribe is called the Chukchansi. And so they have a big resort casino there on their reservation. And the way that it worked is you have, your tribal leaders, and they really run the casino. Anyone who's a member of the tribe gets a cut from the profits, from the casino profits. Well, the tribe was getting so big and so many people were claiming membership that they started kicking people out of the tribe
Oh.
because the dividends were getting smaller and smaller from the casino payouts. And Molotovs were thrown. There were like serious fights, and the feds had to step in and put the kibosh on it. But at least for that tribe, it was just casino money. That was the pot.
And this was happening in your backyard?
It was happening in my backyard. Yeah. So, all right. Anything else on gambling?
No, I think it's bad for society. I find it moderately interesting, especially when it comes to like predicting elections. But things like sports betting, I don't see how that helps us, and everybody's doing it. Like every young guy I know sports bets. So, like if the, legislation that would give this to the tribes also makes it significantly more difficult to sports bet, I don't know, maybe that would be a good thing, but yeah, I'm not too informed on the subject. I don't think it's good.
Well, this is a question anyone can answer. How about from a civil liberties perspective? Should you be able to gamble, choose who you're gambling with?
I mean, from a civil liberties perspective, yes, but from a societal aspect, I think I have to agree with Rebecca on that one.
Yeah, I mean, like the level of gambling that is now possible from your like phone on the couch was reserved for like the most, degenerate Vegas rats.
Yeah.
I don't know, 20 years ago. And like
And you
just
actually had to go to a bookie.
yeah, you had to go and have a real human experience,
Yeah.
And it was a lot more
That's-
difficult to
that's true,
hide
yeah.
your gambling addiction versus now, if you have one, it's very easy to just go on your phone in another room and place a bet.
Yeah. I also find it really funny with these things that gambling is being labeled as prediction markets in order to make it, legal for the Mormons and other groups who would like to justify it for themselves. I don't think sports betting falls under that, but like Kalshi and Polymarket.
Yeah, that's actually, because they had trouble with that, Polymarket and Kalshi. They said, well, it's not gambling because there's no chance at play here. Like it's not a game of chance, whereas you go to a casino, it is a game of chance. There is a definite outcome. It's yes or no, right? And some bets it's like A, B, C, or D, right?
Right.
But for a lot of the stuff on like Kalshi and Polymarket, there's a definite outcome. And you're not just rolling dice. You can actually get information and make an informed decision. So that's how they got around that. Yeah. So they're not considered gambling. Those two. All right. What's next? Oh, fill us in. So this article will be out shortly. Grooming in Wisconsin. There was a big story released by the Cap Times late last year. What year are we in now? 26? Yeah, late last year. What's going on with that?
From what I know now, the Department of Instruction is being audited on their investigation processes for how they look into teacher misconduct after it's reported. The Cap Times came out and had this huge article that prompted a bunch of hearings and new grooming legislation that essentially found between 2018 and 2023, DPI in Wisconsin had investigated over 200 teachers and staff in schools for sexual misconduct or grooming. And that information became public and it was like a media firestorm. But the question there was, why is there only one full-time investigator and one part-time investigator looking into the average of 113 new teacher misconduct cases that are opened every year? And where is DPI's money going if not to investigating misconduct? So the article is about DPI priorities and what happened in the aftermath of this Cap Times article.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about there being one full-time investigator.
Yeah, 1.5, one full-time and one part-time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I am interested to see the results of the audit because I just don't know how you can conduct an investigation into interview witnesses and the teachers in 3 days. So. Also, one of the facts that the Cap Times article brought to light was that in lieu of an investigation, what they were allowing teachers accused of misconduct to do was just voluntarily hand over their licenses, and then they would stop looking into what happened. And so, in cases of sexual misconduct, this is particularly frightening.
For sure.
Yeah.
Very nefarious. Are they banned from being around kids?
So that was the other thing that the Cap Times article brought to light was that if a teacher is voluntarily hands in their license and there's no they're not found guilty of any crimes, they would be able to move school districts and enter into another role that doesn't require a teaching license. So I've seen janitors don't need a teaching license, but also some forms of assistants in classrooms also don't. So there is a database now that has the information of who has had their license either revoked or has voluntarily handed it over. But they're working to add the details of why. Yeah.
Because no one knows. We just see a big aggregated list of licenses that have been revoked. Or do they even give you a breakdown like that?
I believe now,
deactivated or something like that?
Since the Cap Times article, I believe in the aftermath, DPI made a database that said either revoked or voluntarily handed over. I'd have to double check, but I believe so.
Yeah. Okay, Courtney, you're next.
All right. So we did an article, what was it, last month now, with John Phelan from the Center for the American Experiment,
yes,
right, in Minnesota. And he did an article that looked at growth accounting in Wisconsin. And largely what that article found was that GDP growth in Wisconsin was lagging behind the rest of the country, particularly after 2014. So what I wanted to do was write an article about why is this happening. So I broke it down into the 3 different sectors of growth accounting. So human capital, physical capital, and total factor productivity, and looked at why growth was slowing in these 3 areas and exactly what we can do about it. So broadly, what I found that the main drivers of slow growth were things like high regulation in Wisconsin, high taxes, falling educational outcomes, and then the last one that we unfortunately can't do a lot about is an aging population.
Mm-hmm. So schools, wait, say your list again. So education.
Yep, falling educational outcomes, high taxes, high regulations, and
Yes.
then aging population.
What's the rank? I know this was in the article. So where do we rank on regulations or?
I believe we are the 18th most regulated state in the country. Oh, 13th most regulated state in the country. So
Oh boy.
on the higher end for sure.
Yes.
We have over 165,000 unique regulatory codes.
Yeah.
So.
Wisconsin on pretty much every metric that you would care about tends to come in 25th, right? Middle of the pack, which is what you expect. Because we're pretty representative of most other states. So to
Yep.
be 13th is a really bad sign.
And we also have some of the highest taxes in the country. We have the 8th highest property taxes, the 9th highest individual income taxes, and the 12th highest corporate taxes. So those are also all on the high end.
That's crazy. So what about, okay, aging population. So average age is increasing
Correct.
because,
And I believe our average age here in Wisconsin is about a year older than the United States average age. So we're aging faster than
do you know our
the United
rank?
States on the average. I do not know our
on
rank.
that?
No.
I think, yeah, well, this doesn't help.
Definitely below average.
Yeah, but Maine is number 1, oldest population. I think Florida's number 2.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see how we compare to those 2 states. Because, well, Florida's doing really well. They have an old population, but they also have net migration into the state. What about, net migration to Wisconsin? Do you know where that is? I saw a chart recently where we were green.
But yeah, I mean, we are still having a growing population, but we're getting to the point where we're going to be in the negative soon.
Yeah. Yeah, the baby.
So it's very, very slowly growing.
Yeah, the baby problem's a big problem.
Yep.
It's a really fun problem to talk about, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to solve.
Yeah. Well,
Is it a baby problem or young people leaving Wisconsin?
It's mainly a birth rate problem. Wisconsin birth rates are the lowest they've ever been.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because we do have that net migration.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it depends on, where is that, compared to replacement levels or something like that. Because falling birth rates are true pretty much everywhere in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go to the next thing. Okay, we got elections coming up. So we just had primaries last week. I believe voter turnout was single digits, maybe like 10 or 11%, which I think is lower than average, but it's pretty typical, for primary elections. And there just weren't very many competitors in these primaries. It's like you have a single Republican on the ballot or a single Democrat or something like that. But coming up, and this ties into all the legislation that's coming out recently, April 7th, there's a big election, Supreme Court of Wisconsin. So we have, what are their names? We talked about them last time, Courtney.
Maria Lazar.
Yes, Maria Lazar is being framed as the conservative candidate. I don't understand how that's allowed. I don't think she's saying that herself, but when you're talking about an office that is supposed to be nonpartisan, it's really weird that that's how we market people. But I guess it works, so that's why people do it. So we have Maria Lazar. Who's the other gal?
Chris Taylor.
Chris Taylor, that's right. I should know this because I was just reading about this morning. Chris Taylor, over $2 million in donations so far. And yesterday, she got endorsements from 2 really big groups. Ben Yount wrote a story about this. She got an endorsement from Planned Parenthood. And she also was endorsed by End Citizens United. On the flip side, Maria Lazar has brought in maybe $250,000. So last time I said to you, this is a done deal. That's gone. Sorry. Money matters in politics. What do you think?
One, I think it's sad that there was only like a 10% turnout for the primaries, and I wonder what the turnout for this April election is going to be, because local politics impacts my and everybody's life the most of any election types. But I also find it sad that 5 to 10 second ads saying this person doesn't support abortion are enough to sway elections, and that so much money is invested into these because it actually does change outcomes. And of all of the cases that a judge will see, I just don't think it's the most important by far.
Yeah.
So
how many cases are they actually going to have to judge on that issue?
I think it's just to get people to turn out and say, I'm in favor of abortion or I'm against abortion. And so, like, I'm actually going to get myself to the poll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I will say about money in politics is I don't think it matters nearly as much when you look at the high-level races. I mean, if you look at the 2024 presidential election where Kamala Harris far outspent Donald Trump in nearly every metric and still did not win, but the issue is when it comes to elections like these where you're looking at Supreme Court races, lower profile, people aren't nearly as familiar with the candidates or what their roles are, that's when money really has influence.
Don't you remember hearing, though, that the Harris campaign were like blowing through cash?
Yes, that is also true.
I don't know that I've ever heard that of
But
a
that's
Democrat
very
running
typical
before.
for high-profile elections where the Democrat candidate usually gets more funding and spends more money than the Republican candidate. And you don't see them win like in proportion to the amount of money that they spend.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next topic here. Tax relief. So the Republicans in the Assembly and the Senate too have suggested a tax rebate for Wisconsinites of $1.5 billion. So at the start of the fiscal year, well, start of the budget cycle, the surplus was, what was it, 4.4 billion, I think was the total. They were planning on drawing that down by 3.7 billion. And now if this tax rebate goes through, it'll be down 1.5 billion for a total of 5.2 billion. Well, the surplus was 4.4 billion. So that means the whole surplus is gone and that's deficit. Now, we already have a bunch of bonding going on in this current budget, which is as high, I think, as Governor Doyle's term. But Bill Osmolsky, our senior fellow, has a lot of articles on this. One I will recommend to all of you is Wisconsin's Addiction to Deficit Spending Must End. It's in the research section. So it will be interesting to see if this passes. What do you expect? So here's, just so you guys are clued in on this. Republicans want to give tax rebate, which is $1,000 for a married couple, $500 for an individual filing single. And then in order to get the governor's signature, I think he wants $200 million or something like that for school funding, or maybe it's just special ed school funding. What do you think about the possibility of this and the fiscal responsibility of this? Because it seems like Tom Tiffany actually has a pretty good chance of winning the gubernatorial. So it seems curious that if this passes, it would put him in a kind of a bad spot.
Yeah, I mean, with the big elections coming up, the Republicans could be thinking that this would help them with the races. And I know that there's also a big fear that they'll lose the Senate or, lose their margins in the Assembly. So I think they see the tax rebates as a way to sort of get people to say, hey, look, we gave you, an extra cut this year, so you should vote for us in the elections. But and just given that it's an election year and the Democrats also have something to gain from this, if they're getting more education funding, I would say there is a good chance it'll pass. Yeah. But I guess I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. Anything?
I agree with Courtney.
Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, okay. So last thing on the agenda for today is tariffs. Courtney, tell us what happened with tariffs.
Oh, you're making me start.
Yes.
All right, well, recently the Supreme Court just came out with a ruling that was 6-3, saying that Trump's past tariff declarations were unconstitutional, so effectively ending that. But in response, he made a new executive order bumping tariffs originally up to 10%, but now, you can fact check me on this, I believe it's 15% now, correct? Under a different federal statute that allows him to declare these tariffs for 150 days. So, I know you have lots of thoughts on this. Sounds too,
good.
But
my thoughts can wait. Rebecca, what do you think about the tariff plan?
I think it's interesting how they are trying to, justify the new tariffs under new legislation. And You know, the way that Congress has allowed powers that were traditionally given to them by various statutes or the Constitution, and how some of those powers have slowly and sometimes more quickly gone onto like the wing of the executive branch. So
For sure. I mean, at the end
yeah.
of the day, Congress has the power of the purse, they have the power of taxation, and
Hmm.
we can't give that away to the executive.
Yes, non-delegation is
I mean,
the,
I
yeah.
personally thought that the ruling that the Supreme Court came out with was as it should be, but you know,
Yeah.
now they're trying to figure out go-arounds with different federal statutes,
Right.
and I don't know how that's going to work out for them, but you know, it's
Yeah.
very odd to me that they just seem very stuck in this idea that they need to get these blanket tariffs out.
Yeah, they might be getting some more tariff cases in the future.
Mm-hmm.
This ruling was actually two tariff cases in one. So it was Learning Resources versus Trump, and I think it was like Voss v. something like that. But if you read the opinion, it has them both. Yeah, the tariff policy is okay. You know, historically, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the federal government used to fund itself pretty much exclusively with tariff revenue,
Right.
but
that was
exclusively with tariff revenue.
right.
Yeah.
Also, that was before we had a globalized economy as we do now. I mean, we live in a
Mhm.
very different world now than we did when they used to do that at the beginning of the founding of our country.
Yeah. So I wrote a news article this week just explaining the opinion that came down from the Supreme Court. So what do we have? So here's Trump was angry, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And in typical fashion, I think he used this word. He referred to Neil Gorsuch and Justice Barrett as traitors. So the question for me is traitors to whom or to what? And yeah, no, I like the ruling. I think it could have gone further. I think Gorsuch wanted to take it further. If you read his concurring opinion, which I'll throw up on the screen for you guys in a little bit, I think he did too. And if they're going to have more tariff cases coming to the Supreme Court, they might end up having to go that way too, because when Trump is now assigning these tariffs or rationalizing them on the basis of different statutes now,
Right.
well, the question remains, like, are those constitutional? Are those legal? So Roberts, writing for the majority in this one, said, no, they're not. These are being, authorized under IEEPA, the economic
International Emergency Economic
Economic
Act.
Powers Act. Yes. So the main thing about this, Trump's team, their claim was that, well, the statute tells us that we can regulate ... importations.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're an originalist, regulate means to control, to manage, not necessarily to prohibit, but usually you do have to do that. You're defining rules for something. That is not the same thing as taxation. And if you are employing the major questions doctrine, which all of the justices were writing about, that was like the main point of contention in this case, was the major questions doctrine. And major questions doctrine is, can we read into a congressional statute more than what is there on the page? And so the majority said, no, you can't do that. When Congress writes a law that says the president shall have these powers to investigate, block during the pendency of an investigation, regulate, direct and compel, nullify, void, prevent or prohibit any acquisition, holding, withholding, use, transfer, withdrawal, transportation, importation, or exportation of, or dealing in, or exercising any right, power, or privilege with respect to, or transactions involving any property in which any foreign country or a national thereof has any interest. Why didn't you say tariffs? You just listed them. A whole bunch of powers.
Yep.
You cannot fit taxation into regulation because the president, according to the statute, could simply impose a rule. But if you look at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, that is the taxation clause, that is a power reserved to Congress. And the non-delegation doctrine says that Congress cannot delegate core powers to the executive. So I'll have an article coming out later this week really going into this. But here's the bottom line. I'll spoil it, a little bit for folks listening. Okay, taxation power belongs to Congress. We all understand this. Can you delegate it? No. What can the president do then? Well, anything but tax. Well, is there a situation, is there a statute that Congress could write that would allow the president to impose a tax or a tariff on something? And the answer is yes. What Congress would have to do is they would have to write a statute that makes it so that the rule is activated by something or someone other than the president. So Congress could say, if the United States is invaded by another country or has war declared upon it, the president may choose to impose a tariff of XYZ percent for up to XYZ months. But that rule cannot be triggered by the president himself. The problem with the IEEPA is that the president can trigger the rule himself. When you do that, then he has the discretion of imposing a tax. You can't do that because that's a reserved power of Congress. It's non-delegatory. Can't hand that out to an executive or to bureaucrats. And that's done all the time.
I also have another question. So if this, like the IEPA says that you can regulate, does that mean that you could technically still impose like import quotas in substitution? Would that be constitutional?
I believe so. Well, actually maybe not, because that would fall under commerce. That'd be Commerce Clause. So that's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 or 4. Commerce Clause, reserved power of Congress. So whenever you're dealing with buying and selling, that's commerce. Congress has the power to regulate commerce. But what he could do is, if you have a ship that's coming from Mexico and it's gonna, dock in San Diego, California, he could say, all ships must carry no more than whatever, 2 different goods on it.
Right.
He couldn't, probably not regulate like the quantity or the volume of the ship, because that would be working like a quota or something like that. And he could establish rules regarding number of people on board or just a bunch of other things, whatever you can imagine. It just can't do anything to actually affect the volume of trade. He could say, oh, all ships will be searched by blah, 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 blah. He could do that. It depends on the statute. Okay. But regulation is always rulemaking, and the trigger has to be someone other than the person who's executing the rule. Right. Another thing on this note that's been circulating around online is all the people saying, don't worry, he can, right, like you mentioned before, he can use this law, this law, this law, this law, right? Like everyone's giving
because they're all too ambiguous.
Right.
Yeah.
But the question then becomes, are those legal? Are those not in the same position as the IEEPA? So I'll write about those and I'll get answers for everyone. I wonder if you guys have heard this quote. I want to attribute this to Frederic Bastiat. When goods do not cross borders, troops will. So you're the foreign policy expert. What do you think about tariffs strategically?
It's heavily debated. I know, especially in the first months of the Trump administration, there were those on the foreign policy restraint side who thought that strategically we were isolating allies, and while we want to be America first, we don't want to be America alone, and so they would have been less in favor of tariffing Europe or India. I don't know. I'm not an economist. I have an economist brother who's also very torn, but I don't think completely free markets are the be-all, end-all. And like especially to incentivize domestic manufacturing, I can see some practical utility. I'm no tariff expert. I'll leave it at that.
Historically, it's virtually every war has begun as a trade war. I don't know if we can really say that today in the late 20th century up to the present. but historically, there's certainly a precedent for it. World War One, World War Two, Franco-Prussian War, like what, pick something in Europe. Well, the American Revolution. So there's lots of things out there. I do think strategically, geopolitically, yeah, you could use, tariffs as a stick in order to get a better trade deal, right? That's always the idea. Hey, take your tariffs off my stuff, I'll take them off yours. I think so long as they're being used that way, then you can.
Right. I mean, I agree.
actually
If the end goal
change.
is to lower tariffs for everyone, I think that's admirable. But tariffs for the sake of tariffs, thinking that they'll increase everyone's economic wealth, I think is misguided.
Is there a blanket 10 or 15% or whatever it is tariff on everywhere right now? Or what's the, where are these tariffs that Trump put in after the Supreme Court decision? Do we know?
We'll have to see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll let you know in a day or two.
Mm.
Okay, anything else on tariffs?
Nope.
Well, I think that is all we have for today. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I am Michael Lucas. I've been joined by Courtney Graves and Rebecca Draeger. We will see you next time.